Hey guys, if you were here this weekend and heard me mention this, I'm a little conflicted on whether today's the last day or not of this series. Will be my last video of this series because I know there's more in Daniel that we could talk about because he's such an incredible model. His life, his situation is so relevant to us living out our faith in a post Christian America. But I've got a word in my heart for next Sunday, next Saturday, next weekend, and I'm just waiting to see if that word is going to connect thematically what we're talking about in the book of Daniel. But I don't know. More than likely, this is the last one, and I've been waiting a little bit of time to talk about. This is the key, the key. We mentioned the four foundational elements of Daniel's resolve, how he stayed resolved not to defile himself in Babylon, and that was his belief in the sovereignty of God. That was this hope anchored in that sovereignty that God was transcending the moment, which infused him with courage in the moment. There was this incredible sense of biblical humility that gave him favor, not only in front of God, but in front of his captors. And we read that in Daniel 1:8, that he literally asked for permission. So there was this graciousness, this humility with which he stood for his convictions. So, and that's what you see number four, this wisdom. It was this rare wisdom that Daniel had that helped him balance grace and truth. And that wisdom gave him perspective, a perspective to have the and in the conversation when most people they just see truth to the point they're so dogged in the truth that they can't get along with anybody that doesn't believe like them, or they're so dogged in their grace that they really don't even have any truth anymore. They're just willy-nilly about whatever. It's grace, 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 and the truth gets watered down. Daniel had this rare wisdom that gave him a grace and truth in his perspective, a balance. But you can't really study the life of Daniel without this understanding of his prayer life. That's the part of Daniel we've learned since we were children, as we studied that being thrown into the lion's den because he wouldn't stop praying. But there's an intimacy there in Daniel's prayer life, and you see it all the way through the book at various moments when Daniel prayed. He wasn't a man who went to prayer because all of a sudden there was a bad thing happening and he was forced to prayer. He never prayed, and all of a sudden out of desperation he prays. No, Daniel was a man of a settled disposition. When he went to prayer every day, he was just going back to the well that he drank from every day. And it was that intimacy with God that sustained him and created the environment for those four other things to flourish. So I guess you could say it all started and was born in the prayer life of Daniel that created this intimacy with God. I quoted in the sermon this weekend Psalm 37:4, where the psalmist says that if you'll delight yourself in the Lord, that he will give you the desires of your heart. So that when you spend time with him, it's not that if you pray, God's going to give you what you want, what you desire. It's when you're with God in his presence, you spend time with him, he starts changing you, and he extracts old desires and he implants, he places in you the desire in your heart. And that's what Daniel's prayer life did. He delighted in the Lord, and God put desire in him. He put passion in him. He put vision in him. He put courage in him. And I believe that's what prayer does. That's what your prayer life will do. I came back this weekend to preach this message after having been in Minnesota in a youth convention, an environment I used to be in all the time. And there was just something in that moment with those 5,000 kids crying out to God. Almost 1,000 gave their hearts to Jesus on Thursday night. And then we cried out to God together for a spiritual awakening in their generation on Friday night. And I guess in a way you could say it wrecked me. It took me back to my roots, and it really infused this message, my expectancy over this message, because I watched these kids cry out to God, and I want our church to learn how to cry out to God. The thing that was revelation for me was that I know God is sovereign, I know he's in control, but to see it right there in what Daniel was reading when it birthed that prayer of repentance in him in Daniel 9, that prayer of national repentance, he was reading from Jeremiah. And that verse in Jeremiah that basically God promises what he says he's going to do in Jeremiah 29:10 and 11, but then comes back in verse 12, 13, and 14 and says, I'm not going to do it if you don't pray. Which means there can be promises for our generation that we miss if we're unwilling to seek him. He says, if you seek him, you'll find me. I'll do this in your generation if you will seek me. And I believe there are unclaimed promises for us as a church family, for you, for our nation. And I think God is calling us to prayer. He's trying to mature us in prayer, give us some depth and substance to our prayer life to lay hold of what He's promised us. It's like He told me in that prayer room that day. It's here for the taking, Brian. Your future, the church's future, everything you desire, everything I've put in your heart. It's in this room. This is where you go. You don't go to the conference. You don't go to that. Go enjoy all that stuff. Just know that if you really want to see it happen, you get in here and get on your face and you seek me and you delight in me, and I'll give it to you. But it's all going to be birthed in the womb of prayer. So I encourage you, let God stir your heart for an awakening. Let God stir your heart for prayer, and let God forge in you the elements that you need to face Babylon. Let them be born out of the intimacy of your prayer life.